Hello, everyone. Sam, the History Man here, welcoming you to another episode of Fletcher Destroyer Ships. Now, I don't generally show my mug on camera, and, well, now you see why. But I have a book I want to recommend to you. And a lot of you guys who are tin can sailors probably already know about this book. This is for the benefit of those who may not be familiar with this book, but it's called Sea Bag Full of Memories. There you go. That's the cover there. And it's written by William J. And please, I hope I don't mutilate this gentleman's name. It's either Vageli or Vagel, but there, I'll let you see the spelling in case you want to look it up. But this particular book is it's a deep dive into the day-to-day life of sailor, of a small ship sailor from World War II. And I'll just read his intro to you. It says, "I dedicate this book to all the young men who served on the small submarine chasers, patrol craft, minesweepers, gunboats, cutters, and other small combat ships of the United States Navy and Coast Guard during World War II." Now, that doesn't necessarily include destroyers, but destroyers could probably fall into that category. But there are a lot of parallels between what's in this book and what a sailor of a destroyer would have dealt with on a daily basis. And besides, you know, it doesn't have to be necessarily about destroyers all the time, because we want to honor all veterans. Anyway, a lot of old-timers, as I said, may know about this book already, but if you don't, here it is. I recommend it. Sea Bag Full of Memories. Tale of Two Cities. It is not, but if you are into naval history or World War II history especially, recommend it. Go pick this up. Now, it is time to get started. This week, we are starting with part one of our war diary for the USS Black, and that's going to be cranking up right now. As I said before, we are working on part one of our war diary of the USS Black, and as usual, let's get started with the namesake of the ship. None other than Lieutenant Commander Hugh David Black. Hugh David Black was born in Oradell, New Jersey on the 29th of July in 1903. He was appointed to the U.S. Naval Academy in 1922. He graduated in 1926 and served on board the USS Richmond, mainly in the Far East, between 1926 and 28. During the next few years, he was an officer on board the battleship New York, the gunboat, the Asheville, and the destroyers, the Parrott, Rizal, and Montgomery. He was a lieutenant junior grade when he was assigned to the Naval Training Station in San Diego, California, from 1933 to 1934. He then served on board the destroyer, the Upshur, and during 1935 and 1938, he commanded the minesweeper, the USS Lark. Lieutenant Black had duty with the Bureau of Navigation in Washington, D.C. in 1938 and attended Harvard University for 2 years, beginning in mid-1938. He was an executive officer of the new destroyer Benson from 1940 to 1941. In March of 1941, he took command of the destroyer, the Jacob Jones. Lieutenant Commander Hugh D. Black would lose his life when the Jacob Jones was sunk by a German submarine on February the 28th of 1942. Now, this photograph that you are seeing right now was presented to the USS Black by Mrs. Hugh D. Black, his wife, and the ship's sponsor on the 21st of May, 1943, the day the ship went into commission. It more than likely, of course, hung somewhere in the ship, perhaps in the captain's quarters. I'm not sure. The USS Black was laid down by the Federal Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company in Kearney, New Jersey, on November the 14th of 1942, and she was launched on March the 28th of 1943, with her commissioning, as I said before, on May the 21st of 1943. But she would be brought back for the Korean War. Now, the thing about the Black was that most of the ships, even the Fletchers that were recommissioned for the Korean War, that after the Korean War, that was pretty much the end. But the Black was actually brought back for Vietnam. But she was not only brought back for Vietnam, but she pretty much stayed active throughout much of the 1950s. I don't believe she was ever decommissioned during the 50s. In fact, she was recommissioned on July 18th of 1951, and then she stayed active. If most of them, even the ones that came back for Vietnam, were decommissioned after Korea and then recommissioned for Vietnam. Not the Black. She was recommissioned in 1951, July 18th of 1951, but she stayed in active duty until September the 21st of 1969, when she was finally decommissioned, and she was stricken from the register on September the 26th of 1969, and then she was sold for scrapping. On May the 21st of 1943, the day of her commissioning, in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, Commander Jack McGinnis would take the helm for the first time. He would command the ship through her shakedown cruise and all of her gunnery training off of the East Coast, and generally they would do the shakedown cruise down in the Caribbean somewhere. Her first executive officer was Lieutenant Commander E.R. King, and he would actually take command of the ship in March of 1944 and would remain in that position through the end of the war. Now, by October the 1st of 1943, the Black was all set to head out west to join the conflict. However, there was a collision with the USS Block Island, CVE-21, which occurred on October the 10th of 1943, and the Black effected repairs at Norfolk Navy Yard and then proceeded through the Panama Canal and reported on to SINPAC for duty on the 15th of November of 1943, in effect missing the Tarawa invasion by only a few days. However, from that point, she did proceed to Tarawa in company with the USS Walker and was assigned to screening duty off of Tarawa Lagoon at the entrance, maintaining this duty with numerous night bombing raids during this period until the 22nd of December, when she was then sent to Espiritu Santo in New Hebrides to screen the USS Rainier to Funafuti. She would then join up with Destroyer Division 96 in screening the USS Curtis to the Gilbert Islands before resuming her Tarawa patrol, with occasional duty acting as escorts for transports to the 180th Meridian. Now, the Black went through several air raids in the Gilbert Islands campaign, but probably her most exciting moments came on January the 14th, when she spent the day rescuing aviators from 3 downed Catalinas almost within sight of the enemy Marshall Island base of Jaluit. As it happened, a Catalina was on a mission over Jaluit when it was hit by flak and forced down in the water. A second Catalina was dispatched to pick up the survivors, but in landing in the choppy water, she too was damaged. A third plane was sent and landed safely, but the water was so rough that she was unable to gather enough speed for takeoff. At that point, the Black was summoned. Steaming at a full speed of 36 knots through the enemy waters with no protection but her own guns, and with constant warnings coming in of Jap surface and aircraft nearby, the Black arrived on the scene just before daybreak. She dropped her whaleboat into the Whitecaps and managed to bring 22 of the flyers to the ship. Then she made a wide, fast turn through the swells, creating enough of a slick on the water for the undamaged plane with 6 men to get into the air. Just as the mission was nearing completion, 2 Jap ships were reported coming over the horizon, with the whaleboat barely hooked onto the davit and not 2 feet off of the water. Commander McGinnis yelled, "Flank speed!" and the Black took off. For the feat, the Black received the following message from Fleet Admiral Chester W. Nimitz. Quote, "The USS Black and patrol planes are congratulated for fine rescue work of patrol plane crews in rough water near Jaluit. And furthermore, it may be added that this whole episode occurred more than a month before American forces invaded the Marshalls, and that Jaluit was still an enemy base at that time." End quote. When the Black was relieved in the Gilberts, she proceeded across the equator to Espiritu Santos in the New Hebrides, where she created another group of trusty shellpacks. She joined with the forces preparing to assault the Marshalls. The Black's role in the Marshalls campaign was to serve as part of the screen for the escort carriers which supported the landing on Majuro Atoll. The Majuro invasion was comparatively uneventful and was subsequently neutralization bombardment of the Maloelap Atoll, in which the Black took part. For the next few months, the Black's duties were largely routine and fairly uneventful until June. She found herself as part of the striking force, which was to support the Marianas operation. The Black was active both at Saipan and at Guam, mostly in patrol and escort work. On one occasion, her medical staff came to the aid of a stricken landing craft, infantry, which had been hit by a mortar shell and had suffered more than a dozen casualties. When the Marianas were successfully occupied, the Black returned to Pearl Harbor, where the crew got its first liberty in 9 months. Now, to backtrack for just a moment, it's important to note that on March 18th of 1944, Lieutenant Commander E.R. King, who up until this time had been the ship's executive officer, would take command of the Black, relieving the first commander, Jack McGinnis. The Black would arrive at Pearl Harbor on August the 26th of 1944, conducting training operations in that area, including exercises with landing forces rehearsing for the proposed invasion of Yap. From the 3rd to the 14th of September, the Black underwent a Navy Yard overhaul at the Navy Yard at Pearl Harbor. On September the 7th, Destroyer Division 96 Commander T.H. Colby shifted his pennant to the Black, effectively making her the flagship of that division for the time. On September the 15th, she set course for Eniwetok, arriving on the 25th of September, and on the 28th, the Yap operation was canceled, and the task group proceeded to Sea Adler Harbor, Manus Island, arriving on the 30th of October, remaining until the 14th, having conducted training operations in the area in preparation for the Philippine invasion. And that's going to do it for this episode, and I hope you enjoyed it. Of course, be sure to join us for our next installment, which will be part 2 of our War Diary of the USS Black. Until then, take care, and we'll see you later.